This happened 2 years ago when I was 19 and had just moved into a rental house with 2 friends, Sam and Josh. It was the first time any of us had moved out on our own. We were broke, excited, and a little naive. We found this place on Craigslist. A small, older, one-story house just outside Phoenix. It looked like a good deal cheap rent, a big fenced-in backyard, and the best part, no neighbors behind us. Just open desert. The front of the neighborhood was normal families, little kids, retired couples, but our street was a dead end, and our house backed right up to miles of brush and sand. Quiet, peaceful, almost too quiet. There was a motion sensor floodlight above the back door, and we joked it could blind a plane if it flew too low. That thing lit up the whole yard and half the desert behind it whenever a rabbit or wind-blown branch passed by. But it wasn't long before we realized it wasn't going off randomly. It happened 3 nights in a row, always around the same time to AM sharp. At first, we blamed wildlife. It's Arizona, maybe it was a coyote or a javelina or something. But then Josh went outside one night with a flashlight. He walked around the yard, checked the fence, looked for tracks. Nothing, not even disturbed dirt. He said the air felt weird, like he was being watched. On night 4, I was up alone, working on a late paper. It was past 1:45 AM, and I was microwaving some ramen when the floodlight came on. I figured Josh or Sam had gone outside, but when I peeked through the sliding glass door, no one, or at least not at first. That's when I saw him, a man, standing right at the edge of the light. He was just barely out of clear view, dressed in dark clothes, black hoodie, jeans, hood pulled low. His face was mostly in shadow, but I could tell he was facing the house, not moving, just watching. I froze. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't say a word. My first instinct was to call out to Sam or Josh, but I didn't want to draw more attention to myself. I crouched low and backed into the hallway, then ran to wake the guys up. By the time we came back out, the man was gone. We checked the yard, nothing. The fence was still locked. We debated calling the cops, but what would we say? That some guy stood outside for a few seconds, then disappeared. So instead, we set up an old GoPro Josh had and aimed it out the back window. That next night, we stayed up. At 2:01 AM, like clockwork, the floodlight turned on again. We rushed to the window, no one. We checked the footage the next morning. The video was clear until 2:01, then static. Just 15 seconds of corrupted footage. We all felt sick, like someone knew where the camera was and timed it perfectly, like they were mocking us. We finally called the police. An officer came by, walked around, took a report, but said without a clear face or any threat, there wasn't much they could do. Probably some transient, he said. Just keep your doors locked. Days passed, then a full week, no light, no sign of him. We started to feel silly, like maybe it was just a one-time thing. Then came the banging dot. It was 3 AM when we were all jolted awake by the sound of someone pounding on the back door. Not knocking, pounding. Hard, rhythmic, deliberate. We jumped up. Sam grabbed a baseball bat. I turned on the kitchen light. The floodlight was already on, but no one was there. Just the door, rattling slightly from the impact. Then we saw it. Carved into the wood next to the frame. One word, scratched in deep, uneven letters. Soon. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room with knives, a bat, and a chair, jammed under the doorknob. When the sun came up, we packed overnight bags and went to Sam's parents' place. 3 days later, we came back. The carving was gone, like someone had scraped or sanded it off. That was the last straw. We gave our landlord notice that same day and started looking for another place. But on our last night in the house, something else happened. Josh had gone out to get snacks, and Sam and I were watching TV in the living room. Around midnight, Floodlight came on. We froze. I grabbed my phone and started filming. This time, he was closer, right up against the glass door, his face bell, gaunt and smiling, just standing there. His hands were pressed against the glass like he wanted to come in, but wasn't in a rush. Sam started yelling. I called 911. The man didn't flinch. He just stared at us until Josh's car pulled into the driveway. Then, finally, the man backed away into the darkness. Police came again, took our statements. Didn't find anyone. But this time, they did find boot prints in the dirt just outside the fence. They led off into the desert and just stopped. No tracks leading back. We moved out the next day. That rental sat vacant for months after we left. Then the listing vanished entirely. Sometimes I still wonder, did someone know our routines? Was he watching us from the desert? And what would have happened if that floodlight ever broke? I live in Oregon, about 40 minutes outside Eugene. We have this small property, nothing fancy, just an old farmhouse, a woodshed, and about 3 acres of pine forest behind us. I lived there with my older brother, Logan. We inherited the place from our grandfather after he passed. He'd lived there alone for nearly 30 years. We always thought the area was peaceful, quiet, maybe a little too quiet. My brother and I both work remotely, so we're home most days. One night last fall, we had just finished dinner and were watching TV in the living room when Logan got up to take the trash out. A few seconds later, he came back in with this strange look on his face. He said, "You didn't move the axe, did you?" I said no. We always kept the axe inside the woodshed out back, hung up on the wall. He said it was on the ground, now leaning against the doorframe, blade buried slightly in the dirt. He brushed it off, said maybe it fell, but something about his tone told me it didn't sit right with him. The next morning, I went out to the shed myself. There were 2 sets of footprints in the dirt, Logan's boots, and someone else's, smaller, narrower, barefoot. I showed Logan, and we agreed to start locking the shed from then on. We installed a motion-activated light on the back porch, and another facing the shed. For a while, nothing happened. A full week went by with no incidents. Then came the tapping. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a tapping sound. Not loud, just faint, rhythmic, like someone flicking their finger against glass. I sat up in bed. The tapping was coming from the window directly beside my bed. I live on the 2nd floor. There's no balcony, no ledge, nothing someone could stand on. I didn't move, didn't turn on the lights. I slowly reached for my phone, started recording, but by the time I turned the camera on, the tapping had stopped. I peeked through the blinds, nothing. The next morning, Logan said he saw the shed light turn on. Around the same time, he'd gone to the window but saw no one. We checked the shed again. The axe was gone, and this time, carved into the inside of the shed door were 3 words. "Did you look?" We were completely freaked out. Logan wanted to call the police, but I wasn't sure what they could do. We had no cameras, and no one had technically broken in. But things escalated the next night. At exactly 2:31 a.m., the motion light clicked on. I watched from my window. There was someone standing in the middle of the backyard. I couldn't see much, just a figure, skinny, still staring straight at the house. They weren't moving, not even swaying, just standing. Then they slowly turned and walked toward the shed. I grabbed my phone and filmed. This time, I got it. I showed Logan in the morning, and we finally called the police. An officer came out, took the report, saw the footprints, saw the video, said it was probably just some drugged-out local messing around, but they'd send a car to patrol the area for the next few nights. They never did, that night. Logan stayed up with his hunting rifle. I tried to sleep at 2:30 a.m. sharp. The light clicked on again. Logan whispered for me to come downstairs. I joined him in the kitchen, crouched beside the door, peeking through the curtain. There he was, the same man. He was crouched down this time, just outside the floodlight's edge, facing the house. I could make out his face this time, pale, grimy. His eyes were wide and blinking. He was holding the axe. Logan aimed the rifle, but before he could say a word, the man stood up and bolted back into the woods. We didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, we found the axe buried in the trunk of a tree right outside the shed. Below, it was a fresh carving, almost. We installed security cameras the next day. But after that, nothing ever happened again. Not a knock, not a light, not a whisper, just silence. To this day, we don't know who he was or what he wanted, but we've never opened that shed after dark again. This happened during the summer of 2021. My cousin, Jake, had invited me up to his lake cabin in northern Wisconsin for the weekend. He said we both needed a break, no phones, no stress, just some fresh air, fishing, and beer. The place was remote, about 2 hours from the nearest town land, completely surrounded by dense pine forest. No neighbors in sight. His cabin sat right near the edge of a still, black lake. It had a small dock and a screen door that looked out across the water, peaceful, almost too peaceful. The first day was perfect. We grilled steaks, played cards, cracked open a couple cold beers. There was no Wi-Fi, and cell service was patchy at best, but honestly, it felt good to be disconnected. Jake went to bed around 11. I stayed up a bit longer, scrolling through old photos I had saved offline, then passed out on the couch in the living room, right across from the wide sliding screen door. At around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly, not from a sound, just this dot sensation, like something was watching me. The room was dark, except for a faint moonlight spilling through the trees and into the room. Then I heard it, tap, tap, tap. I sat up slowly. My heart started pounding. It wasn't the kind of tap you hear from a branch brushing against a window. It was deliberate, timed, like someone was testing something. I looked toward the screen door. There was a man standing just outside. He was close, only a few feet away, standing perfectly still with both hands pressed flat against the mesh. His face was ghostly pale, hair soaked. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, staring right at me, Or maybe through me. He wasn't saying anything, just breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in this weird, exaggerated way, like someone trying to remember how to be human. I froze. I didn't even have the sense to reach for my phone. I just sat there, paralyzed. Then he tilted his head, very slowly, like he was curious, like he wanted to see how scared I'd get. I whispered, "Jake," but I couldn't look away. The man smiled, just barely. Then he lifted one finger and began scratching the screen. Not loud, just this soft, rhythmic scrape that made my skin crawl, that finally snapped me out of it. I bolted upright, and that must have woken Jake. He came stumbling out of his room, rubbing his eyes, asking what was going on. I pointed toward the door and said, "Someone's out there." Jake stepped over and pulled the curtain aside just a little. When he saw the man, his entire posture changed. He didn't speak. He just turned around and ran to the kitchen, grabbing the hunting knife he kept in the drawer. But when he came back, the man was gone. No footsteps, no sound, nothing but stillness. We stepped out onto the porch with flashlights, hearts pounding. We didn't find anyone, but the screen was still damp where he'd pressed his hands against it, and the faintest streaks of dirt where his fingernails had scratched down. We barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, Jake tried to rationalize it. Maybe some drifter wandered in from the woods. Maybe a sleepwalker from a nearby trail. But we both knew there were no nearby trails, and no one just finds this cabin by accident. The gravel road leading to the lake is nearly invisible off the main road, and the gate is always closed. Still, we decided to stay one more night. Maybe we were overreacting. We locked every door, drew the blinds, and agreed to sleep in shifts. Jake took the first watch while I tried to sleep in the bedroom with the knife nearby. Around 2:50 a.m., Jake shook me awake. "He's back," he whispered. I sat up fast. My heart was already racing before I'd even seen anything. Jake motioned toward the living room. We crouched together behind the couch and peeked over the top. This time, the man wasn't at the screen door. He was standing outside the side window, his face nearly pressed to the glass. He had the same vacant expression, same soaking hair. But this time, he was holding something. A stick, long, smooth, sharpened. At the end, he tapped the glass 3 times with the point of it. Tap, tap, tap. Then, without a word, he walked backwards. Yes, backwards, into the tree line until he disappeared into the shadows. We didn't sleep after that. We stayed awake with the lights on until sunrise. At first light, we packed everything through, our gear in the truck, and sped out of there. We didn't stop until we hit the main road. Later that day, Jake called the local ranger station and told them what happened. They didn't sound surprised. Apparently, there had been other reports in the area, people seeing strange figures near cabins or docks. Nothing ever confirmed. No one ever caught. Jake sold the cabin later that year. He never went back. For me, sometimes I still dream about that man. His wet hair, that faint smile. The way he stared, moving like he knew something. IDN. Single quotes, T'd. And whenever I stay somewhere new, especially near the woods, I always check the windows twice before I sleep. Because that night, there were no footsteps, no warnings, just a stranger behind a screen door who somehow knew my name.